Now, before I begin, I would just like to take a moment to explain that, unlike what the title implies, I will not be spending the next 10 minutes just bashing and hating on this movie simply for existing. Instead, I will be talking very calmly and rationally, explaining why I've chosen to have nothing to do with this movie. And listen, if you love everything about this movie from the concept to what's shown in the trailers and can't wait to see it, or loved it if you already have seen it, then I'm absolutely fine with that. In fact, I'm really happy for you. As I always stress in my videos, you don't have to agree with me, and I hold nothing against those who don't. Alright, so with that whole thing out of the way, let's get right into it. Okay, now I just want to start off by saying that I know virtually nothing about this movie. I've never sat down and watched the trailer and never looked up the plot description. All I really do know is that the movie is basically an origin story for the reason the toy Buzz Lightyear exists within the Toy Story universe. So I guess you could call it a more elaborate version of the Woody's Roundup TV show you see in Toy Story 2, since that basically fills the same purpose. And one of the reasons I'm not interested in seeing this movie is because I feel that Buzz Lightyear doesn't really need an origin story. I mean, in his opening scene, he gives himself a description that you also see inscribed right onto his box. And I think that was really all we as viewers needed to know about his toy line. Besides, from everything that's gathered, it's obvious the writers took heavy inspiration from and is a rather obvious nod to Star Wars. So one could be quick to assume that wherever Buzz originated, it was probably from the Toy Story Universal equivalent of Star Wars, which I guess could make for an interesting story. What would Star Wars look like in another universe? But the thing is, it requires a very high level of creativity and talent to be able to pull something like that off without it feeling like just another generic science fiction movie or the 772nd knockoff of Star Wars. Now, don't get me wrong, it certainly does have the people to back it up. But even if they could pull it off, I still have to ask, was it really necessary? Because I am aware that after the success of Toy Story, Disney did try on a few separate occasions to launch a Buzz Lightyear show. But the thing there was, those felt a lot more appropriate. A kid's cartoon based off Buzz Lightyear's universe. It's like, even though they weren't exactly necessary either, I just think they worked better because I don't know how to describe it, fit in better with what had already been established in the movies. To put it another way, they were very low key and not taken too seriously, which I believe worked a lot better. But now we have an entire feature length movie made by Pixar themselves tackling this. And again, something about that just doesn't feel right. And come to think of it, that is another major reason why I'm not interested in seeing this movie. Because it doesn't feel like something Pixar would make. If you turn back the clock just a bit, you might even remember a time in the 1990s and 2000s where Disney was the one making all these unnecessary TV shows and direct-to-video sequels, and pretty much whatever else they could think of. Basically, they weren't even trying to hide the fact that they were milking their properties for all they were worth. But Pixar was never like that. With them, it just felt different. Like it seemed that every movie they released was done with only the highest amount of effort put into it, and only after everything in their story had been mapped out to the fullest extent. In other words, it always felt like they resisted caving to the pressure by Disney to franchise their properties more and stuck mostly to passion projects and making the best movies they possibly could. Now, sure, there were some exceptions to this, such as the aforementioned Lightyear shows or Mater's Tall Tales, but that's all they ever felt like. Exceptions, and usually rather appropriate ones at that. But ever since Disney Plus launched, it's felt like they're starting to cave to that pressure. Because first it started out as shorts, now they're getting into TV shows, and now it's a theatrically released spin off. And it's just as I said before, this doesn't feel like Pixar or something that they would do. Be so willing to let Disney start spreading out their movies like this. Because I know I've been very critical of the way Pixar tells their stories, and I still stand by everything I've said about them. But at the same time, I will still always give credit where it's due. So while I do still believe that they've become too mature for children, I will be the first to say it. Pixar is great at telling stories. In fact, disregarding the maturity thing, they may just be responsible for some of the best, and most certainly original, movies of the new millennium. But as I said before, ever since they've been releasing stuff on Disney Plus, it just feels like they've lost something. I mean, that Pixar edge that was able to make even the most stoic of us cry and have everybody relating to their stories and characters no matter what. It's just not the same anymore. And I really do feel that in many ways they've started to decline in the past few years. And I think that Disney Plus has a lot to do with that. Because Pixar was never meant to expand their movies like Disney did. And I think the fact that they've started doing that is part of the reason they're running into these problems. Because they're starting to stretch their creativity thin across movies, TV shows, and shorts instead of just being able to focus everything on their movies and the shorts that come with them. And this applies very much to the Lightyear movie in this regard as well. I mean, don't you think the writer's immense talents could be better spent coming up with original movie ideas instead of having to concentrate all their time writing a rather pointless spin off made just to get Disney some cash? And the same goes for everybody else working on this. Don't you think their talents could be better used elsewhere? Because I don't know about you, but for a while it seemed that Pixar felt exactly this way, never wasting their time on pointless stories and only making sequels if they were convinced there was still a story to be told. And I really don't think this movie fits that mold. It just doesn't feel like something we ever needed to see. And if I had to give one last reason as to why I'm not interested in seeing this, it would have to be because Tim Allen will always be the only Buzz Lightyear to me. I mean, I know there is some controversy surrounding whether or not he should have been the voice, but for me personally, any Buzz that isn't voiced by him simply isn't the real Buzz Lightyear, plain and simple. And the same goes for the rest of the cast of Toy Story as well, except for Jim Varney as Slinky. But that's an unfortunate exception that had to be made. Now listen, you are free to disagree with that if you want, but as I've said before, I'm not here to lie to you. And a big reason I'm not interested in this movie is because it isn't Tim Allen voicing him. To me, he will always be the one and only Buzz Lightyear. Again, you don't have to agree with that, but that's personally how I feel. Now listen, As I've already said 100 times, you can love this movie all you want to. You don't have to think I'm absolutely 100% right just because you watched this video. All I'm doing here is voicing my personal opinion on this subject. And personally, I just feel that this movie's existence is exposing just how much Pixar is starting to sell out to Disney, and how that's starting to cause problems for them because of it. And as I said, you don't have to share that opinion, but that's personally how I feel about it. Okay, that's about all I've got. So now I think it's time I hear your opinions. How do you feel about Lightyear? Do you believe it's something worth seeing or not? Please let me know in the comments. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to hear what I have to say. And I hope to see you all next time.